Well, another series down and another Reds Pirates brouhaha. Well, it's not the brouhaha of old, but at least it was a good series on the field. What's up? My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Ethan Smith. I am the host of Locked On Reds. He is the host of Locked On Pirates. And Ethan, this series, my goodness, three games for the Pirates, one game for the Reds. I definitely want to get into our series takeaways from that. I want to kind of get a feel for where we see both of our clubs. We're also going to look at why both these clubs seem so similar, where they are now, where they want to go, and why we keep saying better luck next year. That's all coming up on today's Locked On Reds, Locked On Pirates crossover, recapping the series that was 4-game series in Pittsburgh where the Pirates won 3 games out of 4. And today's crossover is brought to you by supplyhouse.com. It's the site that's made for the skilled trade. Get your HVAC, plumbing, and electrical supplies at supplyhouse.com. All right, Ethan, 3 games out of 4. Pirates took this series. The Reds came in here with like no pitching staff, but that didn't excuse the fact that, Friday for me was really where the series turned.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people could see the series turn that way, especially when you see the Pirates dominate the first game. There was really no doubt in that game at all that the Pirates were winning that first one. The second game comes around, and usually in a 4-game set, that second game tends to be the game that kind of defines how this series is going to go. And Cincinnati did something they've done well all season, which is usually when they score first, they usually dominate the game. And for the large part of it, they did. Nick Lodolo was unhittable for the first 3 innings, first 4 innings. I can't remember how many innings he threw there. But then the 5th inning comes around, and they score 4 runs in that inning. Then you see the 6th come around. They score 2 there. And then the Pirates just kind of coasted along, which was kind of nice to see from Pirates fans because our bullpen has just been so god-awful as of late. And that's why they've effectively removed themselves from the playoff conversation. I was there Saturday. That Saturday was just Cincinnati, I think, kind of taking frustration out from what happened the day before, and they did so in very convincing fashion. Aguilar, by the way, very impressed with what I saw from him. They said it was only his 2nd start on the season, and I was very impressed with what I saw from him. And then the game Sunday, Yasmani Grandal takes Alexis Diaz deep, which immediately reminded me of Jacob Stallings taking his brother, Edwin Diaz, deep in a game that the Pirates pretty much had no business winning at all, giving up 3 runs in the 7th. It kind of felt like that all the momentum had shifted to Cincinnati. Grandal takes them deep. They win 3 of 4. It was just a weird series because there were so many turning points. And a lot of it was also fundamental, I think. Like in the game Sunday, you had 3 errors. You had 3 on Saturday, 1 on Friday, and then none on Thursday. But when 3 of the 4 games contain an error and 2 of those 3 contain multiple errors, I think you can kind of look at where those errors came from and where the wins and losses came as well.
Yeah, I think that what really plagued the Reds in this series was they had guys playing out of position. Santiago Espinal started in right field on Sunday. Like, come on, what are we doing here? But also, and I really want to evaluate this further as we get toward the end of the season for the Reds, but it kind of feels like Spencer Steer's playing out of position. Like, it's good to get his bat in the lineup any possible way that you can, and the infield, hopefully, is stacked for the future, but I'm starting to wonder if left field is really a good spot for him. Defensively, he's kind of there, kind of not. Just depends on the day. And overall, it's been a point of contention that this outfield just isn't good. And as much as we wanted Will Benson and Jake Fraley to be the guys, they just aren't. And Jake Fraley here recently has started to find the power stroke, and then he's been out for a bit now, and you just wonder what the Reds are going to do this offseason because they can't look at it and say, well, everything is status quo. We're going to be good. This is fine. Yeah. This 4-game set was just more and more of the deficiencies of this team that has plagued it all season. And, oh, by the way, we added in the fact that the starting rotation is basically all on the injured list. Like, the thing for me, and what really just irked me was that Friday game. And I get it. They needed to call up Alan Buznitz to just help out in the bullpen because the bullpen's been taxed a lot here recently. But they had a straight bullpen day, and in a game where they were up 5-0, felt like David Bell really let Alan Buznitz pitch a little bit longer than he should have.
Yeah.
And the Pirates were able to capture, it's kind of like you said, so many changes of momentum. They were able to capture the momentum in that game at that point, and they took it over. And that was the only game in which Elly was completely shut down. I mean, the rest of the lineup actually kind of did its job for once. Usually, if Elly doesn't hit, they don't score. But for once, they were able to score without him. I looked at Friday, and I'm like, boy, after you lose that game, and the 10-2 game on Saturday absolutely didn't surprise me because I knew it was coming at some point. This team, if there's anything they do consistently, if they do something really bad, they're going to do something really good, and vice versa, which is why they are in the position that they're in.
Yeah, and I mean, you look back on that Friday game too, the Pirates fans were all too familiar with bullpen games. I mean, you kind of saw one on Saturday. I know Jake Woodford has been placed in a starting role, but he's not really the guy that you would like starting. And Pirates fans, don't worry, Jared Jones will likely be back on Tuesday. All of that nonsense will go away with Herman and Woodford, where you don't really know who's pitching on those days. And that's what I was wondering through this whole series is like, it felt like anytime you tried to preview this series, you couldn't really do so because you didn't know who was going to be throwing for Cincinnati. And when you're looking at a team, and I'm sure we'll touch on this too, that offensively, yes, you have some firepower in that offense, but it's not exactly an offense that you can completely trust every single day. I don't think you want to add on top of that you have to throw a bullpen game on Friday, which in turn, I think kind of affected things through Saturday and Sunday. I know Saturday they had a very solid game and didn't really have to use it, but you still don't want to have to throw, I believe, how many arms was it they threw in that game? Was it 6 or 7 arms that they threw, starting with Buck Farmer? It has Buck Farmer, Sam Moll, Santillan, Buznitz, Wilson, Cruz, and Diaz. I mean, that's a lot of work on a bullpen, especially when we consider, Jeff, that it's August. You don't not want to be doing this right now, even with the fact that, one, you are probably out of the playoff contention at this point, but it's still kind of there. I mean, you could still make the argument that it is a possibility.
Mathematically.
But for both teams at this point, I mean, you're talking about basically winning every single game except that final series that these two play each other, and then the winner of that series would pretty much be the benefactor of who would go on a magical run in September, which, let's never forget, the Braves did so some years back. So, I mean,
that's true.
And
the Cardinals as well. Yeah. You could see it. I just don't know that I trust it, especially with this team. But I mean, no, you're right. That's seven pitchers in that game. There were 2 games, the 2 wins in Toronto. The Reds used 6 pitchers in each of those games. So this entire road trip has really taxed their pitching staff. You had mentioned, I kind of want to go back to it. You had mentioned Julian Aguilar's start on Saturday and how really good it was. And I was super happy to see that because this is a guy that got the minor league pitcher of the year last year for the Reds, and really made some good progress this year going up from AA to AAA. And with all of the injuries, I'm just like, dude, why not? Like, give him a shot. See if he's going to be part of the depth of the pitching staff. And 6 innings of shutout ball is absolutely what you're looking for. I really want to see more from him. And I mean, he was part of the reason that the Reds used 6 pitchers in that one game in Toronto, because they're like, we only want him going 2 times through the order. So to see him pitch as much as he did here in Pittsburgh is a big thing, because they got great news on Hunter Greene that, I don't know why they didn't tell us at the start, because we were all thinking Tommy John, and then it turns out he bumped his elbow on a cabinet, and to take a Michael Scott term away, he now has a protuberance, and so we're waiting on that protuberance to heal, and then he'll be back. But is that going to be a week? Is that going to be 2 weeks? How quickly is that going to be? What's Andrew Abbott looking like? Hopefully they get him back soon, because I'm not even talking about hopefully for some sort of playoff run. I'm just talking for survival. How many games are we going to have to see those 6 to 7 pitchers until those guys come back? Because Sunday was a perfect scenario where Nick Martinez had a shot to show that he's a starter, and every time he has that shot, he has a couple of nice outings, and then he has a couple of outings back-to-back that make you question it. I still say his best role is out of the bullpen, and that's why we saw him and Justin Spires pitch there in that same game. I do worry about how the end of the season is going to come about with this patchwork pitching staff that the Reds now have, and I hat tip to the Pirates because I think that they have come through their NL West stretch of their schedule, something that killed the Reds back in May. And I know it killed the Pirates here in August, but I don't think it killed them as much as it killed the Reds. And the Pirates now have a shot to kind of get back, at least get back up the division standings. Reds and Pirates now tied with 68 losses, so it's not going to be that hard to see them make the climb.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because that was the big talking point is coming out of that NL West stretch is that the Pirates' schedule loosened up a lot. I mean, you look at Texas, they lose that series, but then you also had Seattle. They win that one. You have 3 against the Cubs, Cleveland, and then Chicago again, Washington and Miami and Kansas City in a homestand in like your last big homestand. And then St. Louis, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, and the Yankees. So there's no real team there outside of Milwaukee, New York, and Cleveland that I'm like, you can win those series. Right. And I even have told people on my show, and will continue to say it, if they can find a way to win series down the stretch, a winning record season is still in play. And I think that would be a phenomenal benchmark, not only for the Pirates, but also for the Reds if they can find a way to make that mark as well.
They've definitely got it within their grasp, and I'm hoping for it at the very least for a couple of futures that I took over at FanDuel. But I do want to talk about the similarities between these two teams because there are so many of them, and I think both fan bases will probably be like, ugh, yeah, I think you're right about that. We'll talk about that coming up next. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get them delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get the expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free TradeMaster program. Every TradeMaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from the free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. And thanks for always making Locked On Reds and Locked On Pirates your first listens every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB as Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, going to take you through the dog days of summer and get you ready for the Fall Classic over on Locked On MLB. It's everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, every single day. And every single day that the Reds and the Pirates play each other, Ethan, I just think Spider-Man meme. They got a Cruz that's tall and plays shortstop and has lots of people trying to doubt them. They have good pitching. Pirates might have better pitching, but I think that the Reds and Pirates are very decent pitching staffs, especially with their future prospects. The bullpen can be infuriating sometimes. And let's face it, if they catch a ball in the field, I think we are all going to clap. And if they drop it, we're not going to be surprised.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at these teams, you have, obviously, on the Red side, you have Hunter Greene, Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo, a lot of other guys coming through the system. Pirates are very much in the same boat. You look at Skeens, Jared Jones, Mitch Keller, there's 3 of your guys next year already. Luis Ortiz, probably 2. Johan Oviedo comes back next year. Then you're talking about the next wave, Bubba Chandler, Thomas Harrington, Braxton Ashcraft. Pitching is the strength of both of these teams. We know that. And more specifically, starting pitching. Like you said, these bullpens can be very infuriating at times. They can be the best among the best bullpens in baseball at times. It just depends on what month and what day it is and how hot or cold it is outside at this point. And offensively, you look at Elly De La Cruz kind of being that anchor that makes everything move. Well, Brian Reynolds has kind of been that for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I don't think that it's any slight on his at all that he's not played that great as of late, and the Pirates have also in turn not played that great as of late. Elly De La Cruz, I think, can be the same way. He plays well. In turn, the team's probably going to play well. Yes, you have some guys like Spencer Steer who can hit well and some other guys on your roster that can also do stuff like that. For the Pirates, it's the same way. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, I think, has been a phenomenal addition to this team. I think he's going to be a phenomenal addition for this team next season. After that, Joey Bart, you have him, but he just went on the IL after this series in favor of Henry Davis, which let's see how it goes this time with Henry Davis. But after that, you're kind of looking around and saying, okay, where's the contributions offensively? And I think that's why these teams are so dang similar. And I'll let you give your side on that before I give another take on why I think these teams are similar that me and you actually talked about yesterday.
Yeah, it's something that, I mean, really, the offensive production for both sides, I think both teams could do well. Like, honestly, the offseason needs for both teams are pretty similar. I think if the Reds or the Pirates go out and get a bona fide cleanup hitter, you feel a lot better about the lineups for either team. They've got a lot of guys that are decent at getting on base. The power is inconsistent, but there's a lot of all or nothing guys. And that's where you see these games that are 8-1, 10-2, 6-0, like things like that, where it's just like, boy, you clobbered them. And then the next day you turn around and you get no hit through 6 innings, which, you know, Paul Skeens does that to people. Or 1 hit through 6 innings, or you go, or you face Luis Ortiz and you just get completely dominated. It happens with this team. There is no consistent player in the middle of this lineup that really resets everything, because you've got Elly batting second, which is where he should be. Like, everybody always says that your best hitter should bat second, so that's where he's going to be. But outside of that, there's just not that guy that can reset it for the Reds, and there's not that guy that can consistently bring him in like I thought Spencer Steer was going to be. And so then when you turn around and you watch the Pirates, you've got your guy at the top that's going to get on in Brian Reynolds, but who's bringing him in? O'Neal Cruz can get super hot, and he can be super not. Trust me, my fantasy team knows. Yep. And when it comes to everybody else in the lineup, like, it feels like there is so much potential, but potential does not win ball games today. And that's where the biggest questions lie with both of our teams.
Well, yeah, and I think it boils down to the fact, too, that another thing and another topic that we talked about, a topic that is probably going to hit home on both sides, is while I was there Saturday, I texted you, Jeff, and you'll remember exactly what we're talking about how I said, you know, the Reds fans showed up and showed out. And you look at these teams and how they're similar, and it's hard not to find similarities off the field, too, as far as how things are operated and how things go between these two teams. Two fan bases that some might like each other, some might hate each other, because it is the closest rivalry, I believe, in the NL Central as far as distance is concerned, from what I would know. I'm not sure how close Cincinnati is to some of the other places, but your ownership group can usually go into every offseason and set aside a certain amount of money and say, okay, you look at the needs the Pirates have. They need another outfielder outside of Brian Reynolds. The Reds need outfield help. First base, kind of a question mark for Cincinnati, kind of a question mark for Pittsburgh. The middle infield, on the other hand, you could probably just pick 6 names out of a hat and throw them out there whenever you need them to. And then outside of that, again, the starting pitching is good. I don't think either of these teams really has to think about making an outside acquisition starting pitching wise. The Reds maybe so more than the Pirates do. But when you break it all down, these fan bases are very hungry fan bases that have ownership that, quite honestly, sometimes just doesn't seem as hungry. Like right now, a conversation we've been having in Pittsburgh is, do you bring back Aroldis Chapman? And usually what the answer is right now is, well, if it's $10.5 million again, with all these other needs you have, I don't think you can. because of the payroll that's likely going to be set aside for you.
And there's definitely been a couple of games this season where the Reds, because I was looking this up, I know he picked off Elly. He picked off Nick Martini back in I think it was June was that game, but he also just has pitched really well against the Reds. And it's interesting because whenever he signed him, whenever the Pirates signed him, I remember you and I were both kind of talking okay, well, yeah, they'll trade him at the deadline. And then whenever they didn't, it does make you wonder, could they bring a guy like that back? It's just so tough. The question then becomes, are you going to roll Chapman away from competing? So he's probably not the first move that the Pirates make. That's the same with the Reds is Nick Martinez has a player option, but it's for less money that he's making this year. And does he really want to pursue being a starting pitcher with another team? Because I feel like the Reds are going to kind of get to the point where they're just yeah, you can start for us if we need to break glass in case of emergency, but for the most part, you're going to be coming out of the bullpen. And to do that for $12 million, which is his player option, maybe he takes that, or maybe he thinks he can go get something else on the open market, and then do you bring him back? There's lots of questions that need answered before the answer to a question is Nick Martinez. So I'd be interested to see if he's in a Reds uniform next year, but I've really enjoyed what he's put on the field. But both these teams definitely have similar questions to answer this offseason because, as we have said in years past, because you have done Locked On Pirates now for a good handful of seasons, I've done the Locked On Reds for a good handful of seasons, and it feels like every other year we keep saying, next year, man, Reds Pirates, top of the division. When is it going to happen? We're going to answer that coming up next. Before we do that, though, I wanted to tell you about another one of today's sponsors, and that is FanDuel, because we tell you about FanDuel all the time, and we've got something a little bit different for you today, because now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time, which is great because, football season's only 2 weeks away for the NFL fans out there. Hoo-day. And, by the way, FanDuel still has a ton of great promos, a ton of great boosts every single day throughout the end of the baseball season. In fact, yesterday they had this great boost that was a 100% boost on a money line. So if you took the Pirates, congrats on that one, you would have gotten a 100% boost on that one. That's over at FanDuel. You got to check out FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. And remember that you can catch every pitch of the Reds and the Pirates' hometown broadcasts with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds or search the word Pirates, and you can take the home broadcast anywhere you go.
Yeah, and Jeff, you obviously we have FanDuel, one of our great sponsors, and you mentioned free Sunday ticket potentially and all that other stuff. Well, I put $5 on a fun bet yesterday on FanDuel for the Pirates to have the lead through the first 5 innings. And Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Elly De La Cruz, O'Neal Cruz, and Spencer Steer to record a hit in that game. So on top of winning some money, all you had to do was follow me, and you could have also gotten a free trial for Sunday Ticket. So shout out to Elly De La Cruz and Spencer Steer on the Red side of things for making that happen for me on Sunday.
You got to love that. And I always tell people about the Elly parlay. You got to hit the Elly parlay. It's Elly to get 2+ total bases, Elly to get a steal, and Elly to get a run scored. Usually hits about 4-1, 5-1, something like that. It's hit a decent number of times this season, and with that kind of a payout, you're ahead if you've been listening to me.
100%.
And if you've been listening to me, and if you've been listening to Ethan, we've been telling you for the last couple of years that the Reds and the Pirates are going to be running this division soon, ladies and gents, probably next year. And we've been saying that for the last couple of years. And for the last couple of years, there's been a point in the season where we're just like, we'll get them next year. So when is next year? When are we getting them, Ethan? Because this is getting annoying. It feels like we have been sold and we see different talented players on this team with lots of great future potential, and it's just not making the connection to becoming, from the future, becoming the present.
Yeah, for the Pirates, it's interesting because you're still kind of talking about the future as far as some of what's going on. Next year, obviously, Bubba Chandler, Thomas Harrington, and Braxton Ashcraft are guys I think you can pencil into debut. I wouldn't exactly say when. I don't really know when, but I would expect it to happen. You could even flirt with the idea of having Termar Johnson come up here at some point next year. You're talking about trade deadline acquisitions like Billy Cook and Nick York making an impact potentially next year. And on top of that, you get back Reds legend Dauri Moreta, Johan Oviedo, and Endy Rodriguez next year as well, all from injuries, from season-ending injuries before the season even started this year. So you start patching a lot of holes because they've already been playing Endy Rodriguez at first base, seeing as he had a UCL surgery in his elbow. Probably a good idea for a guy that probably won't be able to throw a catcher all too well. Really, I think it's just the offense at this point. I mean, you're going to go into next year as long as they're healthy, knowing that Skeens, Jones, and Keller are going to be in your rotation. That automatically puts you up there with the best in baseball with those three alone. But does O'Neal Cruz take the next step? Does Ke'Bryan Hayes stay healthy? I think is a big question. Does IKF have another strong offensive season because he is in the middle of his best offensive season ever? Does Brian De La Cruz kind of start the season hot like he did this year instead of being ice cold for the most part since he's become a Pirate? There's a lot of questions again, but I think it's kind of hard to rule the Pirates out of being a contender in this division again, as is the Reds. Yeah. And this is all before we even make external moves for either team. So you're thinking about that too. And it's like, at some point it has to happen.
Yeah. And I feel like part of the reason that I'm optimistic that we're going to get there is that the moves that need to be made are on the lineup side. It's really hard to draw pitchers to PNC Park or to Great American, especially Great American Ballpark. But I feel like you can at least sell the idea to a major league hitter and be like, dude, you could really revamp your career. Look what Nick Castellanos did. Nick Castellanos got $100 million after he played for the Reds. And the Pirates, I mean, I'm not going to say Rowdy Tellez is good, but Rowdy Tellez is getting his name chanted by the crowd. Like, you can at least see his career turning around a little bit. And you definitely see lots of other hitters come through and do their thing. So this is something where I believe that the steps that need to be taken are not steps that feel gargantuan, but you kind of alluded to it there at the beginning of the last segment, is that it comes down to the ownership groups of these two teams. And that's really where I think you and I, again, we go back to the Spider-Man meme, we kind of have the same sort of trepidation because we don't necessarily trust that the ownership groups of these two teams are going to do what they need to do to get to that next step. Because we have talked about my entire life that the Reds are going to get there. And sure, they've had a couple of division championships. They've had wild card appearances and stuff like that. But they haven't moved within the postseason since 1995. And it doesn't feel as though there is a huge sense of urgency. Because quite frankly, there should have been a huge sense of urgency long before now. But we are now coming up on the 30th season since the last time they moved in the postseason, and that stinks.
Yeah, and I mean, even for the Pirates, the Reds were just the benefactor of that same kind of thing. I mean, the Pirates have only advanced in the playoffs twice in the last, this is some math, 30 years. I mean, really, 92 and 2013 were the only times you saw that happen. And you brought up a sense of urgency, and I think it's even a bigger sense of urgency now, because if this year is any indication, there's not a massive gap between teams like the Pirates and Reds versus teams like Arizona, San Diego, and Atlanta. Atlanta, obviously very different because they're dealing with a lot of injuries, but either way, when you go back as a Reds fan or a Pirates fan and look at a lot of these games against the NL West and against the NL East, you kind of wince a little bit because a lot of those games were winnable and a lot of them were one-run games. The Pirates rank in the top 5 in blown saves and one-run games this year in losses. So you're wondering, going into next year, if you just change 5 of those at this current moment, the Pirates are right there.
Right.
truthfully. And with a 10-game losing streak, if you win 3 of those games, you're right there still. And I think that's what's so frustrating is it almost feels like the sense of urgency should be higher because of these things. But at the end of the day, is it going to be from the people that it matters to have that sense of urgency from? Because me and Jeff can tell our fans of our shows all the time, yeah, let's have a sense of urgency, but we're not pulling the strings and we don't have millions of dollars at stake every time we say it. But at the end of the day, you got to start breaking these things down from a baseball standpoint and look at what both teams have built to this point and say, let's figure it out. Like, Milwaukee is not an unbeatable force that is like the Empire of old in Star Wars. Like, they are a beatable team. Same thing with Chicago. Same thing with St. Louis. It's a division that's winnable every year. Go and take it, is what I would tell both of these teams.
And that seems like the best way to end today's show. Thank you so much for checking out the Locked On Reds, Locked On Pirates crossover. Make sure you follow along with our shows each and every day because we are bringing you Reds content and Pirates content every single day because we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every